The general term in our culture is using swing thoughts as opposed to swing feels. Swing feels are perfectly okay. In my system, swing thoughts are banned. We don't want any swing thoughts, right? The swing thought would be your mind picturing your body doing something, or it would be yourself talking to your body part, giving verbal commands to a body part. Both of those things not only do not work to achieve the desired outcome, they almost will always trigger a flinch. And a flinch is simply a low intensity yip.
Hi, this is Ken McCormack from Hampton, Ontario, and I've been playing Stonehenge Golf Club in Bowmanville, Ontario. And this is Golf Smarter number 852.
Swing thoughts create chaos in your mind, which results in poor golf shots. Featuring Jim Waldron.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome back to the Golf Smarter Podcast, Jim.
Thank you, Fred. Great to be back again for, 28 episodes, something like that?
Oh, I don't know. I have trouble counting to 4 and 5 and 6, so.
Yeah, we talked about earlier, getting old, I know.
Yeah, we've been doing it. You know what? Interestingly enough, that this episode, we're going to publish this one in mid-July, 2022. But the episode of Golf Smarter Mulligans that's coming up this Friday and next Friday is also featuring Jim Waldron. From January of 2011, you and I did 2 episodes in a row, and the second one was over an hour, or almost an hour, because it was a members-only episode. And these 2 episodes were, you were about to sit down and write a book called The 15 Gates of Golf and the Keys to Unlock Them. And we said, okay, let's just talk it out so you can talk out your book. And so those 2 episodes that we originally did in January 2011 will be this week and next week's Golf Smarter Mulligans episode. So if you really want a heavy dose of Jim Waldron, you've got these 2 weeks of listening to this and to listening to the next 2 weeks of Golf Smarter Mulligans.
Oh, cool.
So,
well, I got to say, I'll give you an update on the book. So I know we've talked about this since then. So I shelved it because I had a bit of writer's block when I was about halfway through it, and I haven't gone back to it yet. I've been working on other books. I mean, I know we talked about this, I think about 7 or 8 podcasts ago, I think it was. But I finished the big book, which was on my golf swing fundamentals. And I'm working on another book called The Art of Shot Making, which is my understanding of the mental game. So that the 15 Gates book was shelved. I may come back to it at some point because I like the topic. What do you think?
I love the topic. That's why we did an hour and a half on it.
Yeah, no, I thought, but you said you should make it 18, like 18 holes of golf.
Right. Yeah, I remember saying, why 15? Why not 18? You were like, oh,
yeah.
Oh, wow, 18. What an idea.
Yeah. So if I come back to it at some point, it'll be, because easily we could add 3 more gates. That wouldn't be hard to do, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. And I think that you can easily find 3 more topics to add to this book.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Not a problem. So yeah, those are going to be Golf Smarter Mulligans episode 168 and 169. So keep your ears open for that one. Keep your eyes open on your podcast app too. But Jim, got yips?
Yeah, I don't, but a lot of my students do.
I think that's the T-shirt we have to, or we're just, what? That's what it is. Have golf balls made, and just put on the golf balls. Got yips?
Oh, that would actually trigger the yip in some folks. I don't think that would be
No. Put got yips and then put your phone number or your email, your website on there. Got yips? BalancePointGolf.com. And then throw those out in the woods wherever you go.
Yeah.
Or leave them sitting next to putting greens.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they show up.
That reminds me of a conversation, because my whole thing is, as you know, from a little bit about my sort of philosophical background, I'm not a fan of marketing, right? So I always quote the famous comedian Bill Hicks, who's gone now, but he had this great line in his stand-up about, he would ask people in the audience after he did his opening couple of jokes, he'd say, anybody here in marketing or advertising? oh yeah, oh stand up. And then he would say, kill yourself now. Do yourself and the planet and all of us a favor. And everybody laughed. He goes, no, that's not part of my routine. I'm stating a fact. Kill yourself. That's kind of like my view of marketing and advertising. But so I don't do it. I don't do a whole lot of it. But that would be a good marketing technique for sure. Like a T-shirt, a hat, and golf balls.
Well, that's the way I think. Always have. So I don't find that joke funny. I'm not. I don't think that's funny. Of course you don't. I'm a marketer. I'm a cheerleader. I'm a marketer. Yeah. Oh, okay. Can we go on to another topic then, please?
Of course, yeah.
All right, so let's not promote you. Let's just milk every ounce of information out of you that we can, but we don't want to.
I don't consider you in our talking because we're such good buddies. I don't, even though it is, I don't consider this. This is marketing light. I can handle this. But, yeah, it's just two friends talking, on the phone, basically.
The wonderful world of podcasting.
Yeah, exactly.
So, recently on Ted Lasso,
that's right.
There was an episode they were talking about the yips, weren't they? I mean, it wasn't that recent, but Ted Lasso's great. You got to see it.
Have you watched the episode we're talking about?
I've watched every episode of Ted Lasso.
Okay. Because I've gotten a lot of feedback from students who have yips or just regular students who don't, and they're like, wow, this is getting to be like a big conversation in the popular culture now.
Yeah.
There's a TV show about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it lends itself, that show would lend itself to that because there was somebody, it was in his head and they had to get it out of his head.
Yeah. So here's the deal. So we talked a little bit about this in, I think, 2 or 3 podcasts ago, but I want to go into it more because it's gotten to be kind of a regular occurrence. There's a lot of people who think they have the yips who don't, who contact me. And there's, of course, quite a bit more who actually have the yips who don't identify as the yips. So there's sort of a confusion in the mind of the general public about what the yips are and what they're not. So I thought that would be a good one of the topics we could talk about today.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yips is it's considered a neuropsychological disorder. So if you think of someone who has generalized anxiety disorder or mild depression or OCD, obsessive compulsive, or any type of phobia, it's in that rank of neuropsychological. The old school term was psychosomatic, meaning mind-body. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean just hitting catastrophically bad shots. I get a lot of these kind of high handicappers contacting me. They say, I think I have the yips. And they describe then I been talking to them on the phone and I say, well, why do you think that? And they describe a recent round. And I'm going, no, that's not the yips. In other words, hitting a series of really bad, horrifically bad shots in a row is not the yips, right? That's not what it means. Although when you have a yip shot, almost always it is horrifically bad. It's a very different phenomenon than just garden variety, poor mechanics or poor balance or poor tempo causing the bad shot, right? And in the opposite end of the spectrum, we get these low handicappers, guys and gals who are 5 handicaps or better, even some plus handicaps I've worked with recently, who for a long time, maybe a year or 2 or longer, they'll struggle with their game. They'll be in a slump and they'll go from, say, a 0 to a 5 or 6 handicap over the course of a season. And they take lessons and they go to a traditional golf teacher, what I would call a mechanistic or body only teacher. And the teacher will say, well, it's not, no, if you're thinking this is the yips, you're wrong. It's not the yips. It's just that at this point in the swing at position 12, your club face is rotated, 13 degrees out of position, some highly technical story that he'll tell the student. And of course, the person in question, the student, doesn't get better from that. And then eventually they sort of hit bottom and they go, wait a minute, there must be something mental about this. Then they do a little research and then they end up calling me. And it turns out they actually have the yips, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the yips, there's some clear markers for what it really is. And here, you have to have all of these for what I would term for it to be defined as a classical yip. First of all, you have to have a strong emotion of fear. In other words, someone who has yips, when they walk up to the golf ball, even when they're walking 100 yards away, and they know, like someone has chipping yips, for example, and they can see where their ball is next to the green, and they know they can't pitch it, and they know they can't putt it, so they've already determined to chip it, they'll start having a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety when they get even 100 yards away, right? Whereas someone who doesn't have yips, who's just really bad at chipping, won't have that intense anxiety and the intense fear. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think that a lot of people play out of fear anyway.
Of course. But I'm talking about a higher level, like on the upper level, like on a 1 to 10, I'm talking about, 8, 9, 10 level fear.
Okay.
Pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another example of this, if someone already has kind of concluded that they probably have the yips, the morning they get up, like let's say it's they're set to play at noon on a Tuesday, and their alarm goes off at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. As soon as the alarm goes off and they waken, they realize, oh, I'm supposed to play today, they'll have a panic attack. They'll already have severe anxiety as soon as they wake up because they've got 5 hours before tea time and they're already panicking. Whereas someone has sort of normal stress / pressure who doesn't have the yips, they may not start feeling that pressure until they walk on the first tee. Yeah.
Right.
You want to know some of the other markers?
Please.
Another one is when someone has true yips, they have absolutely zero confidence, not even a glimmer of confidence. So when they have a particular type of yip, let's say they have driver yips, they're fine hitting a 3-wood off the tee, but as soon as they decide, okay, this hole's too long, I have to bust it out here because it's a long par 5 into the wind. 3-wood's not going to do it. And they reach for the driver. Just walking over the bag and touching the driver will trigger an incredible amount of anxiety and fear. Whereas when someone doesn't have true yips, they might have mild anxiety, but nothing approaching that level. Yeah.
And again, that's not the same as somebody said, yeah, I just, I have a driver in my bag, but I just can't hit it. I avoid it.
Yeah, it's imagine having zero confidence about any skill. If you couldn't, imagine if all of a sudden you just came up with this weird psychological condition where you believed that you didn't have the ability to walk safely without falling down and hurting yourself. Be like that. You would be paralyzed and you wouldn't be able to take that first step. I'll give you an example of a non-golfer athlete I worked with about 3 years ago. One of the country's top gymnasts, junior, 14-year-old.
Okay, but before you do that, I want to take a quick break here and hold that thought. We'll come back to it right after this. This episode of Golf Smarter is brought to you by Pxg Golf Clubs. Pxg makes world-class, high-performance golf equipment for golfers of every skill level. From their newest, most technologically advanced Gen 5 golf clubs to the more budget-friendly 0211 line of sticks, Pxg delivers unbelievable quality, distance, forgiveness, and feel. No matter your skill level, Pxg has a full bag deal for you. Their flagship full bag offers include 14 clubs, Pxg lightweight carry stand bag, head covers, and a hat. And right now, through August 31st, they're having an incredible sale on their Pxg 2021 0211 DC irons. How can they do this and stay competitive with their pricing? Well, Pxg doesn't sell off the shelf. Every club is customized to fit your individual swing. If you've been in the market for clubs recently, you've probably been told that either A, they should arrive in a few months, or B, we're not exactly sure when they're going to arrive. Not with Pxg. No shipping delays. They will ship your order in a week or less. So if you're curious, go for that limited time sale for the 2021 0211 DC irons at pxg.com or visit a Pxg store or fitting studio near you. Also, if you want to get started by speaking to one of their specialists, call 844-PLAY-PXG. PXG. Nobody makes golf clubs the way they do. Period. All right, Jim, pick up the story where you were about to go on.
Okay, so in this case, this is a female gymnast who was one of the high, I think she was ranked 5th in the nation, something like that, a few years ago, and had a great career, and then suddenly had some technical issues that caused her to fall off the balance beam more often than she had in the past. And she developed a fear of falling and hurting herself, and she just basically lost all confidence in her ability. I mean, she was basically back to the level where she would have been as a total beginner in gymnastics. She had no confidence at all in her ability to stay on that balance beam and not fall off of it. So when she went to start her routine, she couldn't take the first step forward. She was frozen. I forgot what she told me, but because I'm not a huge fan of gymnastics. I don't know all the ins and outs and the rules, but I think she said something like when they call you to the line, you have something like 20 seconds before you have to step forward and start your routine. So the 20-second mark would happen, and she would have failed to start the routine, so she would be disqualified. And she described it as complete lack of confidence in her ability to get up on the balance beam and do the routine without falling off instantly. So that's a whole level of emotional intensity that goes way beyond sort of ordinary golfer level, someone who doesn't have yips kind of stress or pressure.
Yeah.
Right? It's like normal stress times 10. Yeah. The third marker is a mind that is much more in chaos than someone who doesn't have yips. So if you think of what, for those of you in the audience who are familiar with my work on the mindfulness side of things, or who've had Buddhist training or meditation training, you guys and gals out there know, and Fred knows, that the normal state of human consciousness is a mind that's in relative chaos, meaning thoughts come in and out of your mind at high rates of speed. When you meditate, you realize that's happening all the time. It isn't just happening when you're meditating. In other words, the general background noise in your head is chaos. Let's call that on a 1 to 10 scale around 1 or 2. When someone has yips, that goes up to 10. The thoughts come in really, really fast, and they're all negative. And the mind is literally like in absolute chaos. Right? Make sense?
Yeah.
Those are some of the main ones. There's a few others, but you get the idea. So this is not like garden variety stress or pressure that we all feel as golfers, those of us who don't have yips. It's an order of magnitude more intense than garden variety stress or pressure.
So how can a person who is concerned about their performance on the golf course and thinking that they might have it, but how can they identify that that's not really the yips, that they're just struggling mentally right now because they're playing in fear?
Yeah, I think it's mostly a matter of intensity and somewhat of frequency. So, for example, if someone has what I would call severe yips, and most people who contact me have severe yips, though they just can't hit the ball. I mean, someone has driver yips, somewhere between 8 and 9 out of 10 drives on the golf course will be yipped badly, and it might go 100 to 200 yards offline. Whereas someone has normal level some or fear or pressure, they may hit 3 or 4 out of 10 drivers really poorly, and instead of being 8, 9, or 10 on the fear anxiety scale, they're more like 1, 2, or 3. So it's a combination of a difference of degree in both frequency of badly hit shots and intensity. Meaning intensity would be how far offline the ball goes. So, for example, I had a yip student not that long ago. When he yipped, most of his yip shots, not all, but about 80% of them resulted in a shank. So whenever he had, particularly a mid iron, when he had like a 6-7 iron in his hands, a huge majority of time he would shank it. And someone who doesn't have a yip might not shank it, but they might hit it, a little bit toward the hosel. It might just be a sort of a normal sort of bad shot, but it won't be nearly as bad as someone who has true yips. Because shanks are about one of the worst shots you can hit, right? Way offline.
Yeah. How do they talk themselves off the ledge, though? How? Because based on what you're saying, my sense is that if they start thinking about it and trying to calm themselves down, actually the hole's only going to get deeper.
That's right. When someone has the yips in the early stages, before they've actually clearly identified it as true yips, they get advice from their buddies like, well, it's probably not mental. It's just that you're doing X in the backswing, or you have this flaw in your downswing, right? And that's the story they tell themselves, that it isn't actually mental. It's mechanical. Then they take a lesson from a traditional teacher who doesn't understand the mind-body connection, right? Doesn't use that paradigm, that view of the world. And he'll think, okay, it's mechanical. Then he'll work on the mechanical flaw for a while, and they see zero improvement. And then they start to realize, wait a minute, it's worse than I thought. Something else is going on. Then they try to fix it. To answer your question, they try to fix it themselves. And they try to fix it by trying harder emotionally to not yip. And the harder you try emotionally to not yip, the more you guarantee you're going to yip. So it's a vicious feedback circle.
Ugh. Yeah, terrible.
So I know one of the first exercises in my Yips Cure program is I tell people, you got to stop trying to block the yip with emotion. I teach people how to block it with your mental attitude and your ability to focus your mind properly. That you do. But if you have an emotional attachment to preventing the yip, it actually triggers the yip. Exactly the opposite of your intention. And when that starts to happen, they sort of hit bottom and they realize, you know what? Everything I've tried to do to make this better, not only has it not made it better, it's made it worse. I better call somebody. Right. And then I get the email or the call. The yips to me they're my favorite students to work with. One is when you start to help them, and everybody gets some degree of help right away, they're so happy and they're so grateful. And the emotional reward for me as a teacher is fantastic, right? And they're also the most open-minded students you could possibly have. They'll try anything. If I said that to cure the yips, you'd have to stand on your head in a yoga headstand for 5 minutes every day while you were clapping your feet together, like clapping your hands with your feet, and maybe reciting some type of a mantra. By the way, I don't teach that.
You just did.
I said if I did that, they would believe it. They would absolutely do it. They would stand on their head for 10 minutes every day and clap their feet together. They would do it. So they're open to any type of suggestion to help, and that's every golf teacher's dream, is to have an open-minded student who's willing to change, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know how much you love marketing. Because I've got an idea for you, Jimmy. I think this is right up your alley. We got to get you a cape and a costume.
Yeah.
Who are you going to call? Yips Busters. The Yips Busters.
Oh, the Yips Buster. I like it, like the Ghostbusters. Yeah, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. So when they call me, we say it's like an alcoholic who hits bottom. They've hit bottom, and the beauty is when you've hit bottom, that's when you can really make progress. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. That's when you're open.
Is just acknowledging you have the issue, because
Sure.
there's a stigma in our sport. You're not even supposed to say the word yip. I mean, people don't they get uncomfortable using the word.
Sure.
Yeah? But the good news is, once you've hit bottom, the program I developed is extremely effective. Right now, I keep track of everybody. And for people who work with me in person in Portland in the summer or Hawaii in the winter, I have almost 100% cure rate. So about 99.5% of the people who work with me for 2 or 3 days in a row will never yip again. They stop yipping at some point during the school, and then when they go home, they never yip again. And on the online program, it's 94%. The only disadvantage of the online program is it takes longer. It takes 3 to 5 months. We do a lesson about every 3 weeks on a webcam. And so it takes longer. It's a slower process. But by the end of the 3 to 5 months, you're cured.
Wow. But you really have to clearly identify it. And as you've said in the past, if you're a mid-handicapper and you're shanking the ball, you may not have the yips. You're just a bad golfer.
Yeah. Well, again, you could be, but I said, most people who think they
panic.
have it, don't panic. Yeah, if you're about a 12 handicap or higher, and you think you have the yips, I would say there's about maybe a 25% chance at best that you actually have the yips. We talked about this last podcast. The issue is that high handicappers especially don't have an accurate, objective evaluation of their actual skill. Everybody thinks they're better than they really are, until they take a lesson from someone like me or watch it on video, and then they realize, oh my God, I'm doing X and Y and Z, and I shouldn't be doing any of that, right? But for true yips, it's much more common to have true yips if you're about a 12 handicap or less, particularly 5 handicap or less.
Well, I know what there's 100% chance of, and that is taking a break right now. All right, dude, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I lost my train of thought. What were you talking about? I don't even remember.
The yips?
Yeah, what was the specific? This is funny for the audience. We were talking about how we're both getting old before in our pre-podcast interview. We were talking about being forgetful and stuff like that. But I think the point I was trying to make was that if you're a 5 handicap or less and you think you have yips, you almost certainly do. And if you're a 12 handicap or higher and you think you might have yips, you probably do not. But there's another category, which is on my list for today I want to talk to you about, which I call yips light, which is a good stuff to know about, because there is a gray area between someone who absolutely doesn't have any type of yips, or you could say a golfer who has a pretty good mental game, pretty good mental focus, and the other end of the spectrum would be classic severe yips, which I call yips light. And there's 5 aspects of that. The first one is what I termed 35 years ago. I came up with this term called contamination, and that's a big deal because in our sport, the way golf evolved as a sport, contrary to every other sport, we have formed a culture around the game of golf where it's common to believe you're supposed to try to change your body movement patterns using conscious thought during the middle of the swing. In no other sport is that even a thing, right? And that's what I call contamination. So the general term in our culture is using swing thoughts as opposed to swing feels. Swing feels are perfectly okay. In my system, swing thoughts are banned. We don't want any swing thoughts, right? A swing thought would be your mind picturing your body doing something, or it would be yourself talking to your body part, giving verbal commands to a body part. Both of those things not only do not work to achieve the desired outcome, they almost will always trigger a flinch. And a flinch is simply a low intensity yip. Right? So that's one. And then the other one we call the 4 destructive impulses. There's a hit impulse, which is wrong understanding of what makes a ball go far, wrong understanding of power. So for example, when someone has hit impulse, they may have a strong involuntary habit to throw their wrist cock angle away at the very beginning of the downswing. So they kind of throw the club head at the ball from their wrist angle. There's others, but that's the most common form. And that can be such a strong involuntary habit that it kind of seems like a yip, right? But generally speaking, the people who think that's a yip, if I work with them for maybe 30 minutes to an hour, I can get them to stop doing it pretty quickly. By just simply explaining to them what should happen, that's actually a bad flaw and why it's a flaw and what it results in terms of negative ball flight. And then maybe I'll strap a training aid on, or I'll use 1 or 2 training aids. And generally speaking, within an hour or so, they start to see significant improvement in that, right?
Yeah.
That's hit impulse. We've talked about that in the past a few times, I think.
Yep.
The other one is steering impulse, which is wrong understanding what makes a golf ball go straight. So when people have steering impulse, the 2 main ways that it manifests in the body that looks sort of like a yip, hence the term yips light, is they stall their pivot rotation. When you're striking a golf ball, your hips and your chest should be speeding up the rotational speed. So just before, during, and after impact, they should be speeding up. And by the way, for the geeks out there, I know there's a tiny, tiny moment in time, like 1/100th of a second, where it temporarily slows down when the wrist angle opens up. That's imperceptible to the human mind. And in fact, if you didn't have motion capture sensors on your body, you wouldn't even know it's happening. So I'm just disregarding that. You have to keep turning your chest. When your chest stalls or slows down, that's the form of steering. And when that happens, your club head path goes massively into out, and you hit a block off to the right.
I just need to clarify. You're saying steering, S-T-E-E-R? Like when you steer a car?
Like steer.
Steer a bike? Okay.
Yeah.
Steer.
Yeah, so that means you're afraid of hitting it crooked, and you're trying to hit it straight. And so the image of a straight target line on the ground typically pops in your awareness, or maybe it's in the back of your mind. But if your mind's pretty sharp, you may all of a sudden notice that you're trying to make the ball go straight. And when you try to make the ball go straight by trying to make the club head go straight, that's steering impulse. The club edge does not move in a straight line ever. It moves in an arc, a shallow arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because your chest is turning in an arc. So if your chest keeps turning in an arc, does not stall, the club head will move in an arc. And assuming if your ball position is correct, you'll hit the ball straight. And the other aspect of steering impulse, there has to be, in order to get the club head to move in an arc, it's not just chest rotation. You also have to have what's called counterclockwise forearm roll. So your forearm roll contributes to your club head path. Yeah. About 20% of the club head path is caused by forearm roll, and the other 80% is caused by the rotation of your chest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If the muscles in your wrist and forearms tighten up in response to the steering impulse, kind of like a yip, again, but at much lower intensity, your face angle, your club head will not only rotate counterclockwise, it'll rotate clockwise. And so if you're rolling the face angle open or clockwise just before, during, and after impact, and your path is going into out due to the pivot stall, you'll hit the biggest block slice. I've seen people hit drivers that go 150 yards off to the right. Terrible.
Yeah. I've been there.
And if someone has that happening in a really intensive way and really, really, really frequent, then it would be steering morphing into a full-blown yip. It's something that happens on the PGA Tour broadcasts on Sunday on the back nine a lot with rookie golfers who've never won on the PGA Tour. It's extremely common. I mean, the color commentators like Zinger, like Paul Azinger will comment on it, that they'll start to steer their driver and they'll miss it to the right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch that match? I think it was a year ago with Phil Mickelson was playing with Tom Brady. And
yep.
I think, I forgot who the other two, I think it was Bryson DeChambeau, may have been the other guy. With Aaron Rodgers, I think it was.
Was it Bryson? It might have been, yeah.
But in the front nine, every tee shot that Brady hit, Brady's pretty deep. I think Brady's like a 6 handicap, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Massively steered, and every once in a while, because they're all mic'd up, you'd hear Mickelson say, "Yeah, you're steering. You're still steering the driver, Tom. You got to learn to let it go, let it release, let the club head turn over, let your body keep turning through the shot. Don't hold on." And on the back nine, he kind of fixed it. He started hitting the driver straighter on the back nine, but the front nine, all his drives went way off to the right. That's steering impulse.
Interesting.
But if you do that, if it gets worse over time, right, and it starts to happen on almost all of your driver swings, and instead of going 30 yards right, you start going 100 yards right, that means your steering impulse morphed into a full-blown yip. So it's a difference in terms of the frequency and the intensity. Yeah. The next one is the scooping impulse. This is really common in high handicap golfers, particularly beginners in their first couple of years. That's wrong understanding of what makes the ball get airborne in the proper trajectory. Meaning people who have scooping impulse, they have a strong involuntary impulse to direct the club head from low to high. So their club head's going up toward the sky when it's striking the ball. And the only club in the bag when that should happen, it should only happen very slightly, is with the driver with the ball on a tee. Every other club, the club head should be going down when it strikes the ball, not up, right? And that's a really, really common one among mid to high handicappers. It's also very common among all handicaps, even good players in the short game. Really common, including I've had some tour pros with short game yips, and they had massive scooping impulse on any shot within about 60 yards of the hole.
Oh, yeah. Really common. Yeah. I mean, I see people trying to lift the ball and scoop the ball. Yeah. Oh, all the time.
But imagine working with a tour pro who hits down on all those clubs I mentioned and compresses the hell out of the ball. You can tell by the sound when it sounds like a rifle shot.
Yeah.
The sound of compression with tons of forward shackling, which is part of it, And then I videotape them hitting a chip shot, and they've got no shaffling at all, or even sometimes reverse shaffling on a chip, and they're blading their chip shots over the green, right? And I say, I'll say, Bill, just hit down on it. Hit down like you do your 5-iron off the fairway, right? Can't do it. Club still goes high.
Huh.
That's scooping. And again, if it's severe, it can morph into an actual classic yip. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the last one is called helping out during release. I know that's a long phrase, but I can't come up. Maybe I should hire you to come up with a shorter phrase.
You need a marketer.
I need someone to do marketing for me. The problem, Fred, is I'm a notorious cheapskate. I'm not going to be able to pay you much, so I don't know if you're going to want to take the job.
I know. Yeah, we've been through that. No, so let's figure out what helping out during release impulse is, and then maybe we'll come up with a better phrase for it.
Yeah, it's similar to steering, but it's a little different. So steering is about in other words, the intention behind the steering impulse is to not hit the ball crooked, to hit the ball straight. And the intention behind helping out during release is to prevent not solid contact. So people who are obsessed with trying to make really, really solid contact between ball and club face have this particular impulse. In other words, if they hit it low on the face a lot, or too high in the face, or toward the toe, or toward the heel, and they know that, and every once in a while they hit the sweet spot and the ball goes further and it sounds louder and cleaner. A lot of golf is about getting addicted to the shot outcome, and not just where the ball comes to rest next to your target, but the sound and the feel of proper impact can be highly addictive.
Oh, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But if I'm working with a guy or a gal who's between a 0 and a 10, they're good enough to know what solid impact feels like. And it's a dopamine hit, literally. I mean, when you hit the ball solid, it feels pure and it sounds pure. And of course, usually it almost always results in a good ball flight result. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot more of that dopamine hit. And next thing you know, your muscles in your hands are tightening up, the muscles in your wrists or forearms are tightening up, because you're trying to do something in the left to make more solid contact with the ball. Of course, the club head's moving, 100 miles an hour in the case of the driver or more. Your hands are moving about 25 miles an hour when this is happening. You don't have the ability, your conscious brain does not have the ability to make more solid impact happen as a choice when you're 1/10 of a second away from impact with the ball, right? But there are a lot of golfers who actually believe that can happen. Believe it or not.
I got a name for it.
What's that?
Helping out during release impulse.
That reminds me. Do we got time to do a little story about Andy Kaufman?
No, but we're going to do that after we come back, right after this. You have a story about Andy Kaufman?
Well, I use this story a lot with part of my Yips Cure program, because we talked about the worst thing you can do is try to block the yip with emotion.
Okay.
And this is part of a couple of different protocols in psychotherapy. One is called Paradoxical Intention, right? Which is sometimes doing the opposite of what your common sense would tell you is a good thing. It's also part of what's called desensitization therapy, where you do the thing you're afraid of on purpose to get the monkey off your back.
Okay.
When Andy was a young comic, he had never performed in public. This was 1970. The Comedy Store had just opened in Midtown Manhattan, and I forget the guy's name. Bud somebody was the owner. He had never performed in public, and because he had terrible stage fright. But he was performing for friends and family, so he knew he could get an audience to laugh, right? But he didn't know if he could get strangers to laugh. But he wanted to be in show business, but he had terrible, terrible stage fright. He convinced Bud to let him do a 20-minute set. And Bud said to the audience, "This kid's Andy Kaufman. He's 19 years old. He's never performed on stage before. Please be kind. Don't be too rough." Andy Kaufman comes out. Every joke fell flat. They were so not funny, he got booed off the stage after 5 minutes. He leaves the stage in tears. He tells Bud, "Oh my God, I totally misjudged your audience. I gave them exactly the wrong material. I've got totally different material that they're going to love. Give me one more chance." So Bud comes out. He scolds the audience for being too rough on poor Andy, and he says, "Just give him one more chance. Andy told me he's got completely different material. He promises you'll love it." You know what Andy Kaufman does? He comes out and does exactly the same material again. And the audience was stunned for the first 30 seconds or so. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Every joke told exactly the same way. No difference at all. Then they got the joke and they gave him a standing ovation. But in an interview, I saw in an interview that I read years ago, he said, that was my way of getting the monkey off my back. He said, I knew I had no chance to be a successful stand-up comic if I didn't get this fear of the audience out of my mind. And he was fearless after that. He never had any stage fright after that one night.
No, and he did some pretty outrageous stuff.
He was unbelievable.
Hey,
Yeah.
you know what? Since our last conversation, we had part of our conversation that stood out to me was talking about being a solar versus a hoverer. Mm-hmm. And I was always a solar, and have changed now, especially my putting. But all my clubs have hoverer, and it's had a very positive impact.
Good. Well, then I'm going to send you a bill. I hope you don't mind. Actually, just trade me for the free marketing. Yeah, just give me the free marketing.
What do you think this podcast? How many times have you been on here?
I think this is the first time. First time.
Yeah. So the that was fascinating. But another thing I want to bring up here. So this is a conversation I've been having with various teachers because I've been receiving emails from somebody who keeps bringing this up. And so I find it fascinating because he wants to hear more about it. And it's like, when you're ready to start your swing, what are you thinking about? And I told him that you're going to be coming on the show. And he went back and listened to old episodes of yours. And he thought, yeah, Jim would be really good to talk about this. Because you combine internal and external focus a lot.
Right, correct. That's right. It's never either or. It's always the possibility of both, although only one at a time. All right, so here's the answer to that. So I have a system I call the Waldron focal point system. Focal point means what you're trying to pay attention to. Okay? And there's 5 categories, which I'll mention. I'll go over what the categories are in a minute. And the job is to anchor your mind to one and only one focal point throughout the entire swing. And to keep your mind on the focal point, the term I use is seamless focal point awareness. That means there's never even a tiny fraction of a second where there's a gap or a blind spot in your focal point awareness. So it's just seamless from start to finish. It's what Phil Mickelson recently called elongating my focus. What I call sustaining it. Same thing, right?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be the target, although target is far and away the most commonly described focal point among the great players, both tour pros and amateurs I've talked to in the last 50 years in golf. About 70% of the great players I've interviewed said about 2/3 of the time they use target picture, which could be where the ball comes to rest, which we call the target. It could be a bigger, brighter, more colorful concrete object in the distance beyond the target. We call that the reference target. So, for example, off the tee with a driver in your hand, oftentimes you're just aiming at a spot in the middle of the fairway, but there's no distinguishing feature. It's just a sea of green grass. So you might notice a tall oak tree way beyond that point in the fairway where your ball's going to come to rest. That's in line with the center of the fairway. And we call that the reference target. And then the third element is the ball flight in the sky. So the ball at the apex of its flight, we call that the path. And most great players I've talked to who use target picture used all 3. So they had a reference target, they had a target, and they had a ball flight in the sky, the path. So three parts of one overall big picture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But there's other focal points that can work besides target. Many. There's about, if you total them all up into 5 categories, there's about 50 of them.
Wow.
So for example, the second category is your body. So you can focus your mind on any part of your body. Doesn't matter where it is. You can focus your mind in what I call field channel. When you're in field channel, it's direct perception of your body. It's not a layer of thought between your body and your mind. So you directly anchor your consciousness to the sensory nerves in a certain part of your body, right? Like, for example, it might be grip pressure, or it could be bottom of your left foot, or it could be the feeling of your shoulder girdle coiling on the backswing and uncoiling on the forward swing. But there's a difference between perceiving a sensation coming from a body part and talking to a body part, which would be your auditory channel, or picturing a body part, which would be your visual channel. So for all this focal point stuff to work, depends on the student having a clear understanding of those three sensory channels. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The third category is called neutral or non-golf. I'll give you a classic example. This is a great category for people who have a lot of anxiety, so it's one of the more popular categories for my YIP students. But you focus your mind on something that has nothing to do with golf or the golf shot you're about to perform. So the former LPGA star Natalie Gulbis used the nonsense phrase, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So when she walked into the shot to do her aim and alignment procedure, she would start to say easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Well, isn't
right?
that what Kerry Mumford did in the clear key system?
Yes, in the clear key system. It's similar to that. Yeah, it was a way of distracting your mind from the...
Yeah, he had me saying, Mary had a little lamb, I wish I had one too.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, that's a way of so I like Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. But in psychotherapy, these are called distracting techniques. So when someone has a lot of anxiety about a particular topic, like let's say someone has a phobia about driving over a bridge. So if you live in Portland, Oregon, and you have a bridge phobia, you're going to spend a long time on your morning commute getting to work because there's so many bridges right over the Willamette River.
You should move.
But you should move, yeah. That'd be the easy way to do it. But one way to deal with that anxiety is to repeat a phrase to distract your mind while you're driving over the bridge, right? So it's got a pretty good track record for helping to dampen down anxiety. The fourth category is what I call positive mental attitudes, or PMAs. There's about 10 of those. So I'll give you some examples: confidence, commitment, courage, trust meaning implicitly trusting your swing or your stroke, freedom, being carefree or detached from the outcome, courage. You get the idea. And I teach the Stanislavski method acting technique so people can access those positive attitudes, and that becomes the focal point for your mind. So and that's done in field channels. So you feel that I'm a confident golfer, or you feel that I'm a courageous golfer, or you feel I trust my swing. And you stay with, you pay attention to that feeling of trust from start to finish. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fifth category is miscellaneous, and right now there's only 3. The first one is what I call the aiming point, which means where you focus your eye gaze. And for almost everybody except my beginners, I tell people don't look at the ball directly. Look at a spot in front of the ball on the target line. Particularly if you have yips. One of the common universal triggers for people who have yips is the presence of the golf ball in their mind. So if you don't look at the golf ball, you're going to be less ball bound, right? So knowing where to focus your eye gaze is an important golf skill. Yeah. The second one is breathing, and I teach similar to Asian martial arts, which, as you know, I think you know, I grew up in having studied karate from one of the world's leading teachers back when I was 11 years old, 1963, 62. He taught me how to breathe when I'm performing a punch or a kick. And generally speaking, most coaches in other sports agree with this, which is you inhale on the backswing and you continuously exhale to the finish. I've never seen a student with yips who didn't hold their breath at the moment the yip was happening.
Wow.
So if you get them to breathe, it blocks the yip. Yeah.
Interesting.
And the third is you can play a song in your head. There was a Canadian tour pro back in the 80s named Richard Sokol, and he won the Danny Thomas, the Memphis Open event. And that, I think it was either 81 or 82, wearing a Walkman, listening to music, all 4 rounds.
And he was allowed to do that.
He was allowed to do it. And the next week he came in second wearing the same Walkman, listening to music. And then the PGA Tour board banned it.
There you go.
But yeah, you can listen to a song in your head. Now, I don't recommend hip hop or heavy metal because it's bad rhythm and tempo for golf. It's too quick, right?
Yeah.
So you want like Baroque music, like classical music, like Beethoven, Bach, Handel, Mozart, that kind of music. Yeah. So you're paying attention to the song in your head.
I frequently have a rhythm going on in my head, trying to get that 3-to-1 rhythm going. And if somebody's playing music or I get a song in my head, it really throws me off.
Throw you off, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, well, I use the theme song from the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast. That's what I use when I use the music focal point. It's got good tempo and rhythm for golf.
And which one are you? Are you the Beauty or the Beast on that shot?
It depends on the day of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, listen, we're going to pick up more of that, but let's take one more break and we'll be right back. As I talked about earlier with Jim, our next 2 episodes of Golf Smarter Mulligans from early 2011 are discussing the book he was planning to write called The 15 Gates of Golf and the Keys to Unlock Them. Now, in part 1, Jim shares how to learn skills effectively, how to practice more efficiently, and how we can turn obstacles into success.
A good player knows, first of all, before they would even begin to analyze the shot, other than the fact they know what the yardage, let's say they walked it off, there's a sprinkler head nearby, you know it's a 155. They're going to ask themselves questions like, okay, what's the wind doing? Number 1. 2, what's the lie of the golf ball? Now, in this case, it's in the fairway, but okay, so it's in the fairway. Well, what if it's sitting down in a little 3-day-old divot that's got a little bit of grass growing in it, but it's in a little bit of a depression?
Are we talking about a 20 handicap player?
Well, I'm talking about what a good player would how a good player would,
okay, because a 20
think about this.
You know that a 20 handicap player is going to move it out of the divot. You know that.
Well, that's a whole other question, yeah. but the point I'm trying to make is this is one of these smacking the forehead moments. A good player has all this knowledge that they just assume that everybody in golf knows. And unless they do playing lessons for a living like I do, they wouldn't know that the average golfer doesn't know this.
That's Golf Smarter Mulligans, episode 168, part 1 of 2, featuring today's guest, Jim Waldron of BalancePointGolf.com. So, along with your subscription to Golf Smarter, get your weekend started with the best of the Golf Smarter archives that are just no longer available on any podcast app. That's Golf Smarter Mulligans, published every Friday from wherever you listen to this podcast.
I hope that answered your listener's question. But so again, the answer is depends. Now, I had people test all of those, and remember, there's a lot of possible categories in body. By the way, one of the other body focal points, I should say, is tempo and rhythm. So you mentioned the 3-to-1. That's rhythm.
Yep.
Rhythm has three beats. Tempo is 2 beats, which is start to finish. Annika Sorenstam told me years ago that she used the phrase 1-1 to focus her mind on during her swing when she won a lot of her tournaments on the LPGA Tour. So she would say 1-1. And the goal there is to make the length of time of your backswing and forward swing nearly identical. And for example, when people have hit impulse, they tend to try to speed up time on the forward swing. Most people, I promise you, most of your listeners have never heard of this before. I'm guessing. I mean, based on 30 years of teaching this, right? I've never had a single student tell me even one person that they understood this. So I'm pretty sure it's universal.
Yeah, I can see where 1-2 would make you rush the 1-2.
Exactly. So we don't want 2, we want 1-1.
Interesting.
And the reason why is, and I'm not saying it's exactly true, but I will say this, until very recently in the LPGA Tour, if you measure the unit of time of the backswing versus the unit of time on the forward swing, for almost 100% of the players, it was exactly the same. And that unit of time was about 7/8 of a second. If you look on the senior tour today, and those guys are good models for male amateurs, right? It's 3/4 of a second, except for the very long hitters. So there's always going to be a few outliers, but in general, on the senior tour and the women's tour, the length of time in the backswing and forward swing are identical or nearly identical. The forward swing might be 10% shorter in time, right? So, but close enough to being the same. Yeah. Whereas most golfers think you have to make your unit of time on the forward swing like 50% less than the unit of time of their backswing. That's just wrong. So, Fred, do you understand why? Can you see through the illusion? What's the answer? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Here's the answer. Your chest rotates roughly 90 degrees on the backswing. But if you do a proper forward swing, it should rotate 225 degrees on the forward swing.
Oh.
I mean, it's rotating 2.5 times more in space in terms of range of motion than on the backswing, which means if they are indeed identical, that means the RPM speed of your chest rotation on the forward swing is rotating 2.5 times faster than the RPM speed of your backswing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if your backswing was 5 RPMs, your forward swing would be 12.5. And that's why the unit of time can be the same, and you can still hit the ball out there 270, no problem, which what Annika was doing. That was her average drive, was 270.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to, this listener who I'm going to put you guys in touch. Maybe you should be working with this guy.
Okay.
Because you may have the answers for him. And then and people wanted to get in touch with you, Jimmy, it's the best way to do that.
My website is balancepointgolf.com.
Yep. It still is.
Yeah. Yeah. This year was my 30th year in the business.
Congratulations.
And all I got was this lousy T-shirt that said golfsmarter.com. I don't know what the hell's going on here.
No, it says got yips.
No gold watch, nothing. I'm chopped liver.
Well, yeah. If you've been teaching for 30 years and you've been a member of the PGA, talk to them about it. They're the ones you'd be handing out awards for your 30 years of great service. Because you've given us at least, well, we know we've got, 15 years of service from you, if not more. I remember the first one.
I think it's 17. I think it was 2005. Didn't we do a session in 2005? I think
probably 2006. I'll look it up. But I started at the end of 2005, so I don't think you were that early.
Well, you like the hovering, by the way, too. I mean, especially most people think you're supposed to let the club rest on the ground. No, you got to keep the club head weight in your fingers.
Yeah.
You never let the club rest on the ground.
Yeah. Right.
It just makes the swing so much easier.
I would say that 90+% of the people I play with probably just let it rest.
I know. And they have to pull their elbows in to get the club off the ground,
right.
So they don't snag.
And then on putting especially, you can just see how the club head moves as soon as they start to pull it back, and it's not square anymore. It's like, I'm glad I stopped doing that.
Yeah, the face rotates open or closed when it snags on the ground.
Right? Yep.
And again, if you pull your elbows in, that's a big flaw from a mechanical reason. The great Ben Hogan said, and I'm not making this up, he actually said, if I could have surgery to improve my golf swing, I'd ask the surgeon to remove both of my bicep muscles.
Ouch.
It's true. There's 70 major muscles in the human body. The only major muscle group you should never activate is the biceps. Something else makes the elbows bend, not the bicep contracting. There was a top of my backswing. I have pretty good backswing. And my right elbow is bent about 70 degrees or so at the elbow, but my right tricep is still contracting, not my bicep. If I took my left hand off the club at the top, my right elbow would instantly straighten.
Whoa!
And not just me. And ask any really good ball striker. That if you studied any good ball striker, it would be the same thing. But if the average golfer took their left hand off the club at the top, the bend in their elbow would increase, not decrease, and we get bigger because they're using their bicep. Yeah, so don't use biceps, basically.
All right, man.
That could be our next podcast. We could talk about the role of the biceps.
Okay, the role of the biceps coming up with Jim Waldron. We're not sure when, but he'll be back. Jim, it's great to talk to you again, man.
All right, thanks, Brett. Bye.
Clearly, this is not the type of instructional conversation you generally find on the Golf Channel, TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube. But golfers looking for general swing fixes, which may have a temporary impact. But for the long term, what we're learning here, for better or worse, is that your swing is your swing. And it's what's inside your head that has the ability to change. But that's the perspective we get from a golf instructor. Well, next week, by listener request and a little additional prodding due to their reluctance to be on a golf podcast, our guests are Dr. Gabrielle Wolf, a distinguished professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Nutrition Sciences at UNLV, and Dr. Rebecca Luthwaite from the Department of Biokinesiology and Physical Therapy at the University of Southern California. Gabby, has 2 PhDs and has conducted research in motor learning for more than 30 years. Rebecca, among other things, specializes in motivation and learning. What we're going to hear from them is the science behind what Jim has been discussing today, and that is focusing on your swing thoughts is counterproductive. I think about those times that I've been asked by a variety of guests about what was I thinking about when I was in the zone or had one of those incredible playing days. Now that's becoming clear to me of what was going on in my head is that I wasn't focused on mechanics at all, which is why things just flowed smoothly. We're getting into some pretty deep stuff here, but I also believe that we're on a breakthrough path. I'm scheduled to play twice in the upcoming week, and I cannot wait to try and implement moving my focus away from the mechanics of my swing and let my body do the work while my mind focuses away from that action. I want to thank Ken McCormack of Hampton, Ontario, Canada, for introducing today's episode. Now, instead of calling our toll-free number, Ken just recorded it on his phone and sent me the audio file. Easy squeezy. Well, I'd like you to introduce the next Golf Smarter episode. Just reach out on social media at Golf Smarter or write to me directly and become a prize-winning Golf Smarter ambassador. You'll have a choice of receiving a sleeve of balls with the Golf Smarter logo, the Tony Manzoni video, The Lost Fundamental, or a glove and glove storage compartment from redroostergolf.com, where you can choose from 11 styles of gloves in 26 sizes. Well, that's what Ken did today. We thank redroostergolf.com for offering a gift to our Golf Smarter ambassadors. So let the world know that you're on the team. Then earn a gift and tell your friends that you're in this week's episode of Golf Smarter, just for leaving a voicemail. Write to GolfSmarterPodcast at gmail.com and let me know that you'd like to do an episode intro, and I'll send you the simple instructions. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for upcoming episodes, please click on the Hey Fred button at GolfSmarter.com.